I've been talking for 30 minutes and I didn't know the camera was on, was off. Oh my God, I feel like such an idiot. I have to do this all over again. Obviously, because of the call, it dropped my camera because I needed the camera to enter the Zoom call. And so it disconnected the camera from the video and it completely shut my video recording system down. So there's one video that you have to watch and then watch this video. And I had done it and I thought I clicked on the start video button. And I got so into talking to you guys that I didn't recognize that there weren't any numbers saying that the video was recording. I feel like an idiot. Alrighty, so let's take two. Just more time. That's all it is more time. I guess it's good because I got a practice thing through down. So today we're going to be talking about the air conditioning system, of which I'm also going to be posting an air conditioning video from Donut Media, one of my favorite websites right now. Funny, informative, and a good baseline education on the operation of pretty much everything. So not only do you hear it from me, but you also see it repeated uh, in a professional manner, meaning a professional production guy with a video camera and sound stage and a set and equipment and everything else. It's one thing to hear it from me as we speak. It's another thing to see it with all of the animations and the sub videos and stuff that you see when you watch the video. So I will encourage each and every one of you, is after you listen to my lecture of the day, to go and watch the video that I've posted from Donut Media that I put in the fun quizzes section. So that'll be a hoot for you guys to do. Okay, today, and I have a cold, so I apologize for my nasally speech. We're going to talk about the air conditioning compressor clutch, the air conditioning machine, the air conditioning pressure sensor, and the air conditioning system pressure. So I'm going to start off by talking about the air conditioning machine. I'm going to switch it up. So the air conditioning machine is that red R2D2 machine that we wheel out when we're going to work on an air conditioning system. You cannot simply open up an air conditioning system to the outside air and let out all of the gases inside. That's bad. Don't do that. Some of the older hydrofluorocarbons or CFCs or chlorohydrocarbon fluorocarbons are CFCs are bad for the ozone layer. So now we have HCFCs, hydrochlorofluorocarbons, blah, 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 blah. And those are apparently a little bit better for the environment, so we use them. And they're given names like R134A. The old one was like R12 or something, and they're going to even have more letters and numbers when they come out with new iterations and new inventions on that Freon gas. It's based on the Freon gas and how close to genuine Freon it is. Freon is the original DuPont manufactured gas that they put into cars and refrigerators. It's all based on the Freon model. Hydrofluorocarbons that they're currently using is nothing more than a chemical adaptation, I do believe, of Freon itself. Freon with a couple of other things mixed in, which make it much more easier to destabilize in the environment and become harmless, rather than it being something that goes out and just destroys the ozone. At least that's my layman's perspective of it. I'm sure we could all Google it and find out more. So we'll talk initially about the air conditioning machine, a machine designed to recover, recycle, evacuate, leak test, and recharge the air conditioning system. Originally, it's called the triple R. RRR, recover, recycle, recharge. We throw in the leak test, evacuate, because both of those are important. So when we bring over the red machine to a car, we hook up the red hose to the hot side, the blue hose to the low pressure side. So you have a high pressure side, and a low pressure side. And there's a reason for that. We'll get into that in a little bit. We hook up the red machine. We have to plug the red machine in to a wall outlet to give it electricity, so the computer inside can do its magic. And so what happens is when you first hook up the machine, you want to recover as much refrigerant as in the automobile's AC system as you can, however much it is. So inside the red machine are a bunch of evacuation tubs. They're actual cylinders where it expects to pull in refrigerant and put it in this canister to hold on to for a minute before it recharges the system. If you know you're pulling a specific type of refrigerant that's no longer used out of a system, I do believe the newer machines actually have a sensor in it which diverts the gas flow to separate storage units, which allow you to not reintroduce that gas into the system, because some systems are no longer allowed to use banned gases, like I think R12 or R134. I don't remember at this point. I've been at home with COVID, and I'm a cold and my head's all, but I'll remember as much as I can for you folks. The air conditioning machine then goes through a recycling process where it takes the gases that it's found inside your system and sucks it out and depressurizes the air conditioning system because it is under pressure, and it puts it through various filters, cleans it, and lets it sit in a holding tank. Then it finishes evacuating. It literally purges, it sucks out like a straw all of the coolant, or not coolant, refrigerant and moisture, water moisture from the system. This is really important. Water moisture is not refrigerant. Water vapors and water droplets in an air conditioning system are very dangerous. They can form ice crystals, and ice crystals can tear the synthetic linings of an air conditioning hose, the rubber like hoses that it has. It can also damage the compressor and wear, like compressor bearings and compressor failures are due to, like, there's moisture in the system and it builds up ice, and it really makes it harder for the compressor to run, and it can even provide mechanical breakage of parts due to ice buildup. Now, ice is very, very strong, and you wouldn't think it, but moisture at a sufficient content can create an ice blockage, and the system's blocked. The whole thing breaks. The pressure goes through the roof. You lose the compressor. You lose hoses. It's bad. So moisture, water vapor inside of an air conditioning system is muy, muy bad, really bad. So you want to evaporate it. You want to evacuate it. You want to get it out of there. And there are evaporative dryers as I've spoken before, in the areas of your air conditioning system. There's a spot where there's a little dryer that soaks up, it has desiccants in it that soak up specifically H2O, water molecules. Then after you've evacuated, there's a leak test and a pressure test. So the leak test is basically it sends the system up in pressure, maybe 100 pounds psi, and it checks for leaks. You check for leak two ways. Internally, you watch the pressure needle. As long as it stays where it's at, there's no loss of pressure, system's good. If the pressure needle starts coming down because there's pressure leaking somewhere, you've got a leak, now you got to find it. And the second test is that, I think after 2000, and I said in the other video prior to me to not recognize that I didn't push the button, that I thought it was like 2014. I actually think it was more like 2010, 2012, where they came out with that all refrigerants have to have a dye, a fluorescent dye that anyone can check for if they have a blue light. And it's easier if you're wearing the yellow glasses. It just makes it brighter. But if you take a blue light, a UV light, not a blue, like a blue cover, but an actual UV blue flashlight, and shine it in an engine bay, the dye will fluoresce. It means it will glow like a glow stick. And so instead of having to have technicians inject dye into air conditioning systems, they said, we're just going to make a rule that says all new dye has to have dye in. All new refrigerant has to have a fluorescing dye in it, so that when you pull your car in to be checked, the technician doesn't even have to open the hood. He just goes underneath with a UV light, shines it all around, and looks for and sees if there's a leak from your air conditioning system. If there's no leak, you're good to go. A visual check. You're good to go. They'll pop the hood and they'll attach the hoses. They'll go through the other things. But initially, you can easily check for an AC leak, looking for that glow stick glow. Imagine if you popped open a glow stick and leaked all the stuff on your air conditioning system. That's what it would look like under the UV light. It's that green yellow glow. All right. So it does a leak down test, passes the leak down test. Then you recharge the system utilizing the now cleaned. It's gone through some filters, remove any particulate, remove any solid particles from breakdown of the synthetic lines that it goes through or whatever. And it recharges your system. And then it uses its own little tanks. Say you're running maybe 10 pounds too low, it adds 10 pounds of pressure to the system using its own Freon, onboard Freon or onboard refrigerant. I just say Freon as shorthand for refrigerant. I'll say refrigerant. Now you might say, well, how many pounds of pressure do we add to the system that we know of? And I would say that an interesting thing about refrigerants and the outside air temperature, the high pressure side on a fully charged system will be the exact same or within 5 pounds either way of the temperature outside. So if it's 80 degrees outside, the amount of pressure built in the high side of an air conditioning system will be within 5 pounds of it. So between 75 to 85 in that zone, as close to 80 as possible. So it's one of those nice synchronicities in life where the temperature outside is the amount of pounds of PSI of pressure that you have in your system. And yeah, there's a lot of pressure. I know these systems are built to handle like 140 PSI before, failure points. But most of the time they're at like 75, 80 because that's the temperature outside. Sometimes the temperature drops and so does the pressure of the Freon gas in the system. That's the correlation. That's why it's the same temperature outside to pressure inside. And that's how we use the air conditioning machine to, and then obviously you take the hoses off and you put the caps on. And that's how you recharge and set up an air conditioning system. I don't like using the word recharge. Recharge means, and you have to fix leaks. If you find a leak, you don't recharge it. Do not charge a leaking system. You're just spewing contaminants out into the world. Don't do that. We do this machine in the hopes of finding where the leak is. If someone says, yeah, I need to recharge, it's because they have a leak, so we have to find it. There is, however, an issue. Sometimes people think that their air conditioning system doesn't work, when in actuality it works, but it doesn't work as well as they want because it's not the old style refrigerant, and they add more refrigerant to the system. Nothing could be worse. You can overpressurize a system to the point where it will break things. It will tear hoses. It will break the compressor. It will break seals. It'll tear it apart and you'll end up with no AC at all. So overpressure is just as dangerous as underpressure. Underpressure is just not enough refrigerant in the system for the system to work properly. You can't compress, there's no refrigerant. And that's usually because of a leak. A lot of these problems stem from the fact of leaks. Got to fix the leak. Properly running air conditioning systems should be a closed loop. You don't add, you don't take away, it just runs. So anytime someone says, oh, they're adding Freon or they're adding refrigerant, no. You get in and you find out where the leak is. Which brings me to the air conditioning pressure sensor. I can't answer that right now. The air conditioning pressure sensor is a sensor that gives an input signal of refrigerant pressure in the air conditioning system to the ECU. And yes, there's a high and low pressure sensor switch in the pressure lines that just say if the pressure is too high or too low. and a little AC light will come on or blink. Too low a pressure means there's a leak. Too high a pressure means there was a leak, you recharged it, and you followed the directions on the side of the can without having a pressure gauge or you just added it in, and you now overpressured the system. The system might be running perfect. You just might have particulate, maybe a little grain of salt clogging the pressure relief port or the high to low pressure switch or the pressure port. If it's blocking it, refrigerant can't go through. You ain't gonna have AC working. Oh, the belt's spinning and the pump's trying to work, but there's no refrigerant flowing through, and so you'll get no cold air. And you'll go, oh, I got to add some because I'm leaking again. No, you're not. You just didn't. You have to bring it in and have the system evacuated and cleaned. But the person goes to Pep Boys. My EC's not working. Oh, it's not? Was it working a couple of days ago? Yeah, it was cold and now it's not working at all. Oh, you probably got a leak. Go get a can. So you get a can of refrigerant. You go out, you hook it up to the low side, you squeeze all the Freon in, the refrigerant in, and you unhook it. You've just added 40 pounds of PSI pressure to your low side, which now added, so it's 80 degrees out, you've got 80 pounds of pressure. Now you're at 130 pounds of pressure, and it's still blocked by that little piece of sand or whatever that's in there, little grain of detritus from the synthetic lines, and you're overpressuring your system, and all of a sudden your compressor pops, two seals fail, and you wonder why there's refrigerant spraying all over your engine bay because you overpressured the system. The overpressure switch and the low pressure switch are there to protect the air conditioning system and the pieces. The low pressure switch is just important. You don't have enough in there, and you turn your AC on. Now here comes the fun part. Modern refrigerants carry their own lubrication. Used to be we had to add a little, and we still do. You add a little lubrication to it. And it's mineral spirit style oil. It's very light oil to the refrigerant system to keep the compressor running happily. It's oiled. But modern refrigerants usually carry their own oil in it. The refrigerants themselves are also lubricants. There's a lot of chemistry that goes into this stuff, you know. So they had to make these refrigerants also capable of holding a misted lubricant that didn't affect the ability for the refrigerant to provide cooling effects. So yeah, low pressure on the low pressure on the refrigerant, you might damage the compressor, and not the magnetic clutch, the actual compressor pistons. Let's see. That's the pressure sensor and system pressure. And that's where we were talking about. The system pressure is usually within 5 points, one way or the other, of the outside temperature of the air. Last but not least, the air conditioning compressor clutch. This is what I was talking about before when I noticed that I wasn't recording. And it will get me right back to where I was. Whew. The compressor clutch. So these clutches are magnetic. So the compressor actually has a clutch in it, just like your transmission. So what happens is if you're sitting in your car and the car is idling, serpentine belt is spinning the pulley wheel, the actual pulley wheel. It sits on a bearing and it spins. It free spins. There's no drag on it. There's nothing working. It's just a free spinning wheel. You're revving the motor, vroom, vroom, right? The car's running, serpentine belt spinning, alternator's spinning, power steering pump is spinning, the water pump is spinning. It's all spinning. The air conditioning pump right there on the side spinning. But it's not grabbing onto anything yet. It's just freewheeling it. You're in your car and it's hot out. So push the AC button on. This pushing the electronic button for air conditioning triggers a series of events. The first thing it does is it tells your engine to up the idle. If you're sitting at a stoplight, you're now tasking the engine with producing a little bit more power because the air conditioning pump, when you run it, takes around 5 to 10 horsepower when it's on. Now, when you're flying down the highway doing 6,000 RPM, 88 miles an hour, looking to do the DeLorean time jump, uh, 510 horsepower is nothing. Your engine develops that easily. But an idling engine only develops 30 horsepower. I don't care, most engines you're idling in 30 to 50 horsepower range, unless it's obviously if it's a muscle car, these numbers are different. But if it's just a store-bought Honda Civic, your Civic isn't developing much horsepower at idle. And if you turn your AC on and the AC needs 5 to 10 horsepower, it will grab your idle, and now your engine's needing to make extra horsepower, and it can't because you're not giving it any gas. Turning on the AC system on a low idling car, like say it's idling at 650 RPM, you hit the AC button and ask something only generating 25 horsepower to keep it's just making 24. When you ask 10 more horsepower to come out of it without giving it extra gas, your car stalls just because you turned on the AC, because it's not developing enough energy. So the first thing that it does is when you click it, the signal goes to the ECU saying, driver has requested air conditioning. And the ECU goes, okay, hold on. All right, here's what we do first. We are going to up the idle from 657 RPM. We're going to go up to 1100 RPM. Why? Because at 1100 RPM, or 100 RPM, a little over 1,000 RPM, your car is now developing, say, 30 to 40 horsepower. Nice bumper. So if the AC compressor is asking for 5 to 10 horsepower, engine's like, yeah, no problem, I got that. Right? It's not as critical as if it was making half that amount of horsepower, and it would just drag it down from idle. Now your car's idling at 1100. The computer sees that we got 1100 on RPM idle. Good. Go ahead and activate the magnetic clutch for the air conditioning system. And now the freewheeling front wheel pulley, there's a couple of wires that go to the front of the mechanism of your air conditioning pump. This is the clutch, the magnetic clutch, that when electricity goes to it, the magnets push to the outside like a drum brake, grabbing onto the spinning wheel. When it grabs the spinning wheel like brakes on a drum brake, the actual mechanism of the pump for the air conditioner now also starts spinning, because it's this magnetic armature that's on the outside that has these little grabber bars are connected to a center post, and that center post is a center shaft that goes through and is attached to the pistons inside of your air compressor pump. I should say refrigerant compressor pump. So the refrigerant compressor pump is now, through the magnetic clutch, connected to the spinning accessory belt, and now the air compressor, or excuse me, the refrigerant compressor is now also spinning. Now the air conditioning compressor, which is now spinning, and the little pistons inside are compressing the Freon gas into a high pressure gas, and even at a certain point, a refrigerant liquid. It compresses it to the high pressure point, 5 pounds plus or minus from the outside degrees. So if it's 80 degrees out, you're going to be around 80 pounds of pressure on the high side of the system. When it's pressurized, the refrigerant, the compressor, has pressurized using little piston pumps to pressurize the refrigerant gases to around the same temperature as outside. It flows then through what's known, well, it's basically a radiator. It's like a condenser. This radiator takes the latent heat. So when you pressurize something, you create heat. So what we do now at this point is we have this Freon under pressure, and there's a lot of heat there. And so we want the heat gone. So we flow we push this flow of refrigerant through something that looks a lot like a radiator, suspiciously like a radiator. It's a form of radiator. Radiator just means to radiate. So you push the refrigerant through this radiator, and as the car travels through the air, ambient air from outside flows through the radiator, cooling off, taking away all that excess heat, but leaving the pressure. Remember, we're pressurizing the system, and then we're removing heat, which makes room for more pressurized refrigerant because we're adding to it. We keep adding to it, and we keep cooling it off until the system is at a point where the high side is now pressurized. It has both high pressure refrigerant as a gas, and it's condensed down a little bit into a liquid form. And this liquid form now travels down the pipeline through a desiccant container, which removes any condensed water moisture, right? Because it's still hot, like 80 degrees. So relatively hot. Warm. We'll use the word warm. But water vapors at this point can be removed from it using desiccants. It's like those little packets. You guys ever buy sneakers and you get those little packets, those little white packets with the blue lettering on it, and it feels like big chunks of sand in there or salt. You ever cut it open? It looks like salt. That's a desiccant. It's a very specific mineral that is created, and it is used to remove moisture, H2O, from wherever it is. And in this case, used to remove moisture from your box of sneakers. If you get enough of them together, they're great to put in sneakers to get, stinky sneaker smell out. There's a desiccant, gets the moisture away, and it keeps things from forming like residues and films and bacteria and stuff like that. So it's a good idea to use. So in the air conditioning system, the refrigerant desiccant, the dryer, sits there, removes the water from the refrigerant, and it passes through a very small orifice into a large tube. Here comes the fun part. If you have a compressed gas that has somewhat liquefied, some of it's liquid, some of it's still gas, but most of it's liquid, like in a can of air. You guys ever go to Staples and get that can of air to blow? It blows off your keyboard. Or even you guys use freeze off. You know how we use brake clean? Oh, perfect example. Brake clean. Who here has ever used brake clean where they've squeezed out almost an entire can at one squirt? You've taken a liquid brake clean mixed with the pressurized gas of the backing gas, and I think they use nitrogen or some other non-flammable propellant. And what happens is if you shake it up and you spray it, all that liquid brake now becomes fumy, and some of it remains water, liquidy, not water, liquidy, right? But it evaporates eventually because it's alcohol based. And what happens is as you spray from the can, pressurized fluid and gas comes out of the can, and the pressure in the can lessens as all of the brake clean leaves, and the can becomes super cold. This is the basis of air conditioning systems in automotive. When you take a compressed gas and after you've put that's the other thing, when they put the gas in these cans are hot. They have to cool off. So you wait for them to cool off, naturally just sitting in the air. And they get put into boxes and they get shipped around the world. And then they come to our automotive, and we take the green can of brake clean out and we spray it. And the can, as it sits on the pallet, is just room temperature, right? Air temperature. just like in an air conditioning system for a car. Air temperature is the pounds. So we pick up the can and we squeeze the top, the little button, we spray it all out, and all of the compressed gas leaves, and it's this lowering of the internal pressure where we get a temperature drop. And that's what we take advantage of in car air conditioning systems. But the best part is what they're doing is they're having a hose at the bottom of the brake clean going around to the bag that you spray into. So you spray into this bag, and all the brake clean goes in the bag, and then it condenses down at the bottom, and then it takes all that through a compressor, compresses it down into a liquid again, and then puts that in the bottom of the can. So it's just one big loop, and that loop is how we have air conditioning systems. And indeed, that's exactly what happens next. But the best part is, as the pressurized refrigerant, liquid, and gas gets pushed through the orifice, a very narrow hole in a tube, and then it goes to an expansion area where now the hose diameter is actually physically bigger, right? That loss of pressure, it's like spraying from the can into the air as the refrigerant liquid and the refrigerant gas spray out of the orifice hole, it expands. And when it expands, it loses heat. It becomes cold. And we take advantage of that because now we route that expanded refrigerant that was under pressure through a miniature radiator about the size of this book, maybe even half the size of the book, with an in and an out metal hose, right? Metal, they have little stubs that come out that we attach the air conditioning system to. And what happens is that now super chilled refrigerant is making its way through this radiator, this core. And when you put a fan on this side to blow air through it, we get cold air. And that's the cold air of the air conditioning system in your car. And believe me, there's another little radiator next to this one that's from the heater core, so you get both hot and cold air. And depending on which fans and mode doors and blend doors you have, it dictates the amount of hot air and cold air gets mixed together to give you your perfect 72 degrees air conditioning air in your car. Another side interesting thing is, because the cold air is cold, it also condenses moisture. Moisture will form on the surface of this condenser, and that will really hang out on the bottom of whatever's holding this small little radiator in your driver's compartment. And so you need to get this water out, this moisture out, instead of it piddling on the floor at your feet, which is an actual problem with people have clogged vents or clogged hoses coming from where the air conditioning, the refrigerant radiator is. That water spills out and gets onto the floor of the car when the hose is clogged. But most of the time that hose is open and all the moisture goes out. And that's what you see when your mom goes to Walmart and says, stay in the car. And I go, but I want to go in. You go, no, I'm going to go in and out, in and out. I'm just getting the prescriptions. And she leaves you in the car with the car running and the AC on. And you look down over the windowsill and it looks like your car is taking a pee. It's not. It's just the air conditioning system taking all the moisture from the cabin and it becoming liquid again on the cold radiator of the air conditioning system, and it goes out of the car. There's just a little tube that goes down and out the car. And your car pees that way. It leaks water. It's just water. And it also has one up by the front, by the compressor. So the compressor itself can get really cold, and it develops on the outside of the compressor housing the hoses in the engine bay. develops frost. You know, if it's really moist outside, it'll develop frost. And interestingly enough, if you stop driving, the engine idling will develop enough heat to melt the frost, and that'll add even more water getting down falling down when you stop your car and you idle it for 15-20 minutes outside of whatever store you're at, Walmart. So then now you have this chilled gas, refrigerant gas, that you're blowing a fan over through the radiator that it's going through, and that's radiating and pushing cold air into the cabin where you're sitting, and hot air from the cabin that you're sitting gets sucked into the backside of your dashboard and gets flowed through it. So air is recirculated in the driver's compartment, in the driver's cabin, the passenger cabin, and the air gets conditioned. Ta-da! It gets set to a specific moisture. You know, the moisture drops out because it all leaves through that little spigot of a hose, and the temperature drops. So it's good. So now that the refrigerant gas has expanded and become cold, and we've taken advantage of it by blowing the fan across it, it starts to rise in temperature, not in pressure. It's still low pressure at this point, but it's starting to rise in temperature up to whatever the temperature is of the air that you're blowing over it. And it goes back towards the compressor, where it takes low pressure refrigerant gas and recompresses it back up to 80 pounds or whatever it is that, you know, if it's 70 degrees out, back up to 70 pounds of pressure. And by compressing it again, it heats it back up. So now it's got to go back over to the hot side condenser, and the air outside the car will cool the charge down to ambient air temperature. So then you have ambient air temperatured high pressure refrigerant. So that's a lot to say. And that's how an AC system works. Go ahead, when you're done with this video, go ahead and watch the video over there. Oh, I know what it was. And the magic word is motorhome. Motorhome. Go watch the donut video I made and answer the questions there and here. This will just prove you watched the video. That one will have all the questions. Ready? Everybody, high five.